Kyle Filipowski, fabulous. Should we be getting super excited about this second round pick? It's next on Locked on Jazz. Bum 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 pow.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider, and this is Locked on Jazz. It's your daily podcast on Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps and on YouTube. Quick note. I apologize for no show yesterday. What happened was I was in Arizona. I was planning on doing a show, but I was supposed to be off. I have it kind of set this year that I'm missing some games to go watch my kids do things. So I was supposed to be watching my daughter in Arizona. Bowler was under the weather, and we kind of found out the night before. And so very appropriately and professionally and nicely and all those things, my bosses reached out and said, "Hey, where are you?" Because I had been in Boston last time I did this. And I said, Arizona. And they were like, "Is there any chance you could get back?" So yesterday, I did not have time because I was flying back from Arizona and getting ready for a game that I didn't plan on calling. And it was a TV game. So did that. Hopefully Bowler feels better. He's back Wednesday in his usual chair, and I don't tarnish it anymore. But that was why there was no Locked on Jazz yesterday. So I just want to make sure. Apologize for that, and didn't feel like I should call Leaf on that short of notice to step in. So we'll get to that. We'll talk a little bit about that great Rockets game, as well as last night's Blazers game. On today's show, we will do Trends Monday because we didn't do it on Monday, even though it's Tuesday. And we will touch a little bit on that ball game that took place the other day with the Rockets, because I thought Isaiah Collier and Keyonte have this brilliant night, and then last night, not so much. And like, why? What's the roller coaster that's taking place there? We're going to start, though, with Kyle Filipowski and the way he is playing right now, and how excited should Jazz fans be about this. It's kind of a cool thing for us to look at in this. So we'll talk about that to start. Thank you to the everydayers that are out there each and every day that make this show click as it is. So thank you for tuning in each and every day. All right, Kyle Filipowski last night was great. Kyle Filipowski is beginning to be great more often than not. My first big picture comment here is on a draft that was really lacking talent, and a draft that everybody talked about as being really poor. The Jazz front office has grabbed three kids who really do have a chance. Now, there's still a long way to go, and we're not winning a lot of games, so we're not playing the highest level games, and so guys can get away with more minutes. And like, it's, whether Kyle Filipowski last night was terrific and had 20 points and 11 rebounds, and he was terrific in his previous start to that. He had 20 points and 10 rebounds against the Clippers, and that's pretty exciting. On the other end, like, he's not doing that for Minnesota right now. He's not doing that for Denver right now. And so there is some level that you're rolling these guys out there. They're getting time, and that makes you suddenly, get excited because they're playing in games that aren't, you get it, right? Now, with that said, he continues to show some things that are really exciting. He is fabulous right now in a bunch of different ways. He came from Duke, and I think we knew the skill set. The skill set was very good with the ball in his hands, very good passer, very good vision, very kind of 6'3" mindset in a 7-foot body. And that is certainly proven to be true. And go back to the San Antonio game earlier this year. He catches at the elbows, and he conducts the whole night, and he does a great job. If you go back then, like 3 nights later, the scouting report gets on him. Suddenly, he had in that San Antonio game early in the year, he goes to the basket. He scores 12 points. He goes 5-8 from the field, and 2 or 3 of them are spin moves. And the spin move goes away. And he has a pretty good game against Phoenix. And then we go to LA to play the Clippers. And all of a sudden, this is middle of November, the Clippers have decided, we're not guarding you at all. And he's standing out on the perimeter, and Zubac is in the middle of the lane, and they're not guarding him a lick. And I think it shook him. And frankly, for the next period of time, I think it was almost a month, or maybe a little more, about a month and a half, about from November 15th, when that happened, to the middle of January, I think he was really shook. He shoots 15% from three over the next 16 games, and he is trying to work on changing his shot because he realizes his shot isn't good enough, and he's got a bunch of data that's telling him his shot's not good enough, not only just makes and misses, but the stuff they work on. And I think he's really shook. And he struggles. And now all of a sudden, he has started to make his shot at a very high rate, and it's opening up a lot of different things. In the last 20 games, Kyle Filipowski is now shooting 55% from the field, 48% from three. 55 and 48. Well, now this changes all sorts of stuff. So let's go back to what we knew about him. What we knew about him is could pass, move it, see the floor, play almost like a clearly kind of was a guy who played with the ball in his hands as a young player. So he has those skills, even though he's 7 feet tall. And then they dropped off him. And to his credit, he's evolved as the year has gone on to be this better shooter. And right now he can really shoot it. From up to February 1st, he was 7 of 31 on above the break threes. Last night, he goes 4 of 4. He's now 11 of his last 15 since February 1st. Now, that's unnatural. But it's still a huge sign that up to February 1st, he'd made 7. Since February 1st, he's made 11. It's the 25th of February as we record this. So we're seeing his offensive game begin to develop there. The other thing that happens to him is what happened to him in the middle there is he goes to San Antonio and he has this great passing game. And then he has this game where he has a bunch of moves to the basket. And the league takes away the spin move, and he doesn't have that anymore. And he kind of realizes, I can't do that in the NBA. And then he can't conduct and pass if they're not guarding him. So now what's happening is he's out top with the ball, and he's shooting it well enough, they have to come guard him. Well, that opens up all the cutting lanes behind him. We just lost the microphone. That opens up everything. That opens up Cody Williams' baseline cut. That opens up a slash from the top for John Collins. That opens up things because they're big or someone similar is out there. Now, last night, which was interesting, for the first time, Denny Avdija started to guard Kyle Filipowski because they didn't want to guard him with a big anymore. In the Houston game, we saw Kyle put it down with the right hand, power into the defender who was a smaller defender, and then Jeff Green came over too late, and he scored it. That's the answer now. So now when they start guarding with a smaller guy, he puts it on the deck and he powers to the rack, and if he's able to be strong enough and finish, his lower body is really strong. Last night we saw him go with the left hand. Hard drive was on Kamara, who's a really good defender, one of the best defenders in the league. And I think they end up overturning it on a call, but who cares? Like, we're seeing these plays suddenly come out here offensively, and he really becomes an interesting player and a force to be able to play with. The next question is going to be defensively. And he's going to just have to figure out how to move his feet and play defensively. They called him up every time last night. They called up Micah Potter and got Micah Potter for 4 or 5 straight, or maybe that's too many, 3 or 4 straight. And then they went after Filipowski in every play to close last night's game. And it's the same thing in the Clippers game when he was absolutely great. Then late in the game, he got bogarted like 3 or 4 times. He's going to learn how to be, so he's interesting because he's pretty physical in his ability to rebound. His rebounds last night were big. They were out of area, high up above the crowd rebounds last night. He's going to have to learn how to be physical defensively and hold his ground. Right now, he's retreating, he's getting hit, and he's getting taken under the basket. And then he doesn't have the length to be able to defend. But he is showing a high-level offensive game right now with these opportunities. And defensively is going to be the story of whether or not he makes the next step or not. Will Hardy was really interesting in yesterday's press conference about life as a tweener. He's a little 4 and he's a little 5. The real question is, what is he defensively? Because he can do anything offensively. And his responsibilities are very different if he's a 4 or a 5. So it makes it hard on him to learn everything. But here's the issue. The reason he's a 5 is because you don't want him switching 1 through 4. But the fact is, at the 5, everyone's making him switch 2 because you're probably not going to be able to play drop with him. And right now, he's not great in isolation defense. That's just the truth. I'm not trying to pick on him. That's just the truth. So he's one of the bottom, I think, 100 out of the 115 guys defensively who have guarded X amount of isolations. I think he's about 100th. Okay, he's a rookie. Who cares? But he's going to have to, that's what he's going to have to figure out, is how to move his feet and how to play defensively. And here's the exciting thing. If he can figure it out, how to get switched on to guards and handle it, it actually opens up the ability for him to play the 4 or the 5 because that's the same responsibility defensively. Since he's not likely to ever be a drop big because he doesn't have great length, even though he's 7 feet tall, he's going to have to be a big that switches most of the time. And if he has to be a big that switches most of the time, he might as well switch out of the 4 than the 5. And it opens up all sorts of things. Offensively, I do think he's better at the 5 because it opens up more passing lanes and cutting lanes if he's playing out and they have to guard him because he's now shooting it well enough. Final note. I will share this. I'm a little suspect on the shooting. He's worked really, really hard at it, and he's changed it, and it's great. And let's see if it lasts because his free throw shooting is not great. And usually free throw shooting is an indicator of your ability to shoot threes. But if he's able to buck that trend, it's great. Right now, he's on fire, and he's fabulous. The flip is fabulous for the Utah Jazz. Roller coaster for Keyonte George and Isaiah Collier. Why so up and down? We touch on it next on Locked on Jazz. Tuesday edition of Locked on Jazz is brought to you by my friends over at Murdoch Chevy, located in Utah, in Woods Cross and in Logan. The Chevy truck, that's the Silverado, and the Colorado, and they're both pretty awesome. I mean, the Colorado's the smaller one, zippier, maneuverable, fun. The Silverado's just, I call it the King Poobah of all trucks because you're sitting up there. It's like being in a lazy boy chair. I had one for a while. It was pretty rockin' awesome. I kind of was like, oh, this is why everybody wants to have trucks and love it. And the rest of the lineup of cars, absolutely fabulous. The Chevy Equinox at 2.9 APR right now. Plus, you've got the electric vehicles. You can go test drive the Chevy EVs they've made major strides in their electric vehicles all the way from the Silverado to the Chevy Blazer EV as well. All there at Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross and in Logan. And by the way, if you're heading over to either of them, why don't you please let me give you the VIP meeting that you deserve as a Locked On Everydayer? Email me at dlock09@gmail.com. Today's show is brought to you by DoorDash. They swish or swoosh, and you save with the code NBA50. What's this all about? Well, when someone goes off in the NBA, you win. Every time a player drops 50 or more in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. It's that simple. When a player scores 50 or more in a game during the 24-25 NBA regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. So, game day feast. After the epic 50-day performance, celebrate by ordering wings, pizza, burgers, late night cravings. After the win, you got it. It all happens. Or it's lunch on the go that day with Dash Pass, and you can get your favorite meals with zero delivery fees, reduced service fees. Plus, now you save even more with this NBA offer. You must sign up for Dash Pass to be ready to save. So when a player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get $50 or 50% off any order the next day, up to $10. Just use the promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight. After a 50-point game on eligible orders of participating merchants, must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. We'll keep an eye on it. See who's going to win Shea or who's going to be that drops 50 next. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. Have you signed up for a daily Locked On Jazz newsletter? It's pretty great. It brings you all it's a number one stop for all NBA stuff. Katie Heindel writes national articles. Josh Lloyd gives you fantasy stuff. We link to the biggest stories in the league, and you get a daily story on the Utah Jazz. Keyonte George and Isaiah Collier against Houston the other night were so good. That's by far the best game that we've seen out of Keyonte George. 30 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 10 of 17 from the field, 5 of 8 from 3. Isaiah Collier was so good 12 points, 10 assists, 4 rebounds, pushing the tempo, playing the game right. So good. And then last night comes. And they weren't terrible, frankly, but the box score was ugly. Key hits a bunch of shots late that make his box score look a little bit better, but he goes 6 of 22, and Isaiah Collier goes 2 of 9. What's fascinating to me about this is that Houston is the second best half-court defense in the NBA and is the one who's supposed to put all sorts of pressure on you and force you into mistakes, and the Jazz kind of handled Houston. Now, they also got it at 4 o'clock in the morning and may have just been a step slow all game. Kamara is as good and ferocious an on-ball defender as the league has right now for Portland. He picks you up 94 feet, and he gets into you, and if you watched what happened with the play of Isaiah Collier last night, is that Collier, I thought, did a really good job of breaking that pressure, but I think it wore him out. I think it was just another challenge. For Key, it was just kind of the constant on-ball pressure. Specifically to Keyonte, I actually thought he dealt with this better than he has before because he usually gets stripped once or twice a night. This is one of the biggest things he's going to have to deal with, is really tough, intense defensive pressure on the ball. This is where he's probably better off playing off the ball. His handle is not great, and his speed into actions is not. Keyonte has a tendency either right as he crosses half court to slow down, and now all of a sudden the half court line is the defender's friend. Isaiah does a much better job of kind of working and then accelerating across half court into enough space that gives him the opportunity to still get us into our offense. But I thought in the second quarter, their pressure just wore the Jazz guards down and they began to struggle. And that's where the drought happened in the shooting. And I think we could try to overanalyze and say, I actually just think this is like the story of young players. I also think there's something about following great games. And my theory on following great games, and I don't mean to equate myself in any way to an athlete, but I will share this, that I know personally, particularly earlier in my career, if I called a really good game, and how do you know? You just know. You know when you're good, okay? I can tell you the night I was the best night I've ever had in my NBA career as a play-by-play announcer was in Oklahoma City, Paul George, overtime game. I can tell you all about it. I just had it in a way that I've rarely had it. And I was terrible for like a week and a half afterwards because I kept trying to recreate that night instead of calling that game. I felt a little bit like that with Key last night. I thought that Keyonte a little bit was trying to recreate the night before. And if you kind of look at some of Key's best shooting nights of his career, they often are followed by not as good shooting nights. One, because he's not going to shoot 50% every night. But even just recently, he has that pretty good game against the Lakers where he goes 7 of 12, and then the next day he goes 3 of 12. And against Houston, he goes 10 of 17. The next night, he goes 6 of 22. And he had a pretty good game against New Orleans where he went 9 of 20, hitting 4 3, scoring 26. And the next night, he went 6 of 20. I think there's two things that happened with Key here. I'm kind of making this up entirely. It'd be interesting to talk to him. San Antonio went 9 of 16, had 26. And the next night, he went 9 of 23. And when I looked this up, the two things that jumped out to me were that this does seem to be a pattern. Against Chicago early in the year, he goes 8 of 18. The next night, he goes 3 of 11. That there does seem to be a pattern that he doesn't generally follow a great night with another great night. The other thing that he does have a tendency to do, and this is just statistically, is follow a big night with another high-volume shooting night. And to me, that's a signal that you're playing the other night's game still. That you're trying to recreate what happened the other night, and so you're going to keep shooting a lot, right? So he took 17 shots against Houston, and last night he took 22. That's a little misleading because he took 3 bombs late, but it's time. He would have taken 19. And if you go back to like his big scoring night against New Orleans, I talked about he took 20. The next night he took 20. Or he had a good scoring night against Charlotte, he took 22. The next night against New Orleans, he took 20. Every time seems to be the one inconsistency here is, well, he didn't have as good a night, but he had a decent night against Denver. He had 23 in the next night out at home, where he's always struggled. He only took 8. But he does seem to be that if Key has a good night, the next night out, he matches the volume and he doesn't match the efficiency. totally making this up, but my theory is he's trying to play the other night still. Okay, that's personally me sharing my own personal experiences and putting it on a 21-year-old NBA player. And maybe that's ridiculous as a 54-year-old guy, but that's just a thought. For Collier, I think it's still just a mystery every night on how the game's going to play out. And frankly, I'm not sure that he was that far off his regular game last night. He's just not a high shooting percentage guy. I did not think that he was able to make as many plays last night. And I think that's the defensive pressure of Portland, that he's just a little rushed, a little off, and he's just not able. He only had 4 assists, and he's not able to get into the passing lanes and get the thing he'd seen in the previous. I mean, his previous 10 games, he was averaging 10 assists. And so I just thought that's, I think, the Portland ball pressure. And that's another lesson for Isaiah Collier, is how does he learn that next step? Isaiah's really been terrific. And I think the common thread between Isaiah Collier and Kyle Filipowski and their draft and them going 29th and 32nd, and how do the Jazz have them and how good are they going to be? So I would actually say that I think the story right now in both these guys, and we can do this as a longer show this week, is that both of their strengths are more than people realize. However, I would still say that all of the scouts and analysis on both these players' weaknesses was correct. And they both need to figure out how to overcome their weakness. Filipowski's ability to defend and what position defensively, and Isaiah's ability to shoot, if they're going to be high-level, viable, 25-plus minute-a-night players in the NBA. Chauncey Billups was very positive about Isaiah Collier last night and said literally he has a gift with his ability to see the floor and find other guys in a day and age where everybody else is minded toward scoring first. And as a starter, Collier's been terrific with 9 assists a game, 43% from the field, but that 28% from 3 is a real thing, and not going to the line makes it very hard to be a good enough, efficient player for him. Fun times. I know the win-loss record's not there right now, but it's fun times. These are fun games, interesting to watch this development. I'm excited every night going to the arena right now with this. All right. Trends Monday. Super interesting stuff coming up here on who's hot, who's not, where are they trending, who's fading, who's a disaster, who's the worst defensive team in the NBA for the last 10 games. That's an interesting little thing I have for you next on Locked On Jazz. Today's edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you in part by our good friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action, and if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into the same game parlay. Live betting feature allows every moment of the game to be exciting, whether it's a late game rally, picking a player to get hot or hit a 3, whatever it might be. Right now, you can do it, and you get paid instantly in an easy-to-use FanDuel app, and new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your one shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook betting partner of the NBA and Locked On. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. Everydayers, you are the best. Cannot thank you enough. Make sure you sign up for the daily newsletter, Locked On Daily, to get it done. All right. We like to start with the top 10 team, or the top last 10 games, and then go to the last 2 weeks of what's going on. This is a funky little one, by the way, because it spans the All-Star break. I actually think our next 2 will have some value. And then I think then it gets a little funky during the end of the season. Okay. So the number 1 offenses in the NBA right now are interesting to me. It's back to Cleveland, and it's a 125.3. And then Denver at 125. Denver's a legit title contender. They're really figuring this out offensively right now. Oklahoma City's 3rd, Detroit is 4th, and Boston is 5th. The surprise team in there is Detroit, and then the Lakers is 6th, winning 8 of their last 10. The number 1 team in the NBA over the last 10 games are Cleveland at plus 17, Oklahoma City at plus 14, Boston at plus 13, the Lakers at plus 13, Denver at plus 12, and Detroit at plus 12. And then there's a mammoth drop. So 6 teams right now are just playing better than everyone else. Interesting. The bottom teams are Charlotte minus 16, the 76ers at minus 10, Phoenix at minus 10, Toronto at minus 8, Pelicans at minus 7. Jazz are sitting at 21st at minus 5. I mentioned the 5 top offensive teams, Cleveland, Denver, OKC, Detroit, and Boston. So Detroit's really the interesting one there. And the Lakers are 6. Teams that cannot score right now, Charlotte is miserable at 102. Miami, no Jimmy Butler. Brooklyn, Orlando, Toronto, and the 76ers. Best defensive team in the NBA right now is the Brooklyn Nets. Jordi Fernandez has them young and D'ing up. Lakers are 2nd. Orlando is 3rd. Boston is 4th. Cleveland is 5th. And Oklahoma City is 6th. These hot teams are dominant. This is really interesting. The worst defensive team in the NBA over the last 10 games is the New York Knicks. Wow. The New York Knicks are the worst defensive team in the NBA over the last 10 games. Has Thibodeau worn them out? Is that Karl Anthony Towns? What is that? Phoenix is next at 29th. Pelicans are 28th. 76ers are 27th. Sacramento. And then Dallas. Dallas, remember the reason they traded Luka is because he couldn't play defense. And they're the 25th ranked defense in the NBA. Oh, they also have Gafford hurt and a few things like that. All right, let's go to most recent trends. This will get us close. This is last 2 weeks of action. And so that gets us a little bit fewer games because of the All-Star break. This is each team's just about last 5 games, which gets us a little bit closer to just. So Cleveland's number 1. Detroit has won 5 straight at 21 differential. Boston, Golden State has won 3 or 4 by a good margin. And Orlando, worth watching on Orlando when you hear another number here to see whether they might have clicked back in some way. Teams that are struggling the most: Charlotte, Philadelphia, San Antonio, who is in full Cooper flag tank, Phoenix, Minnesota, and Chicago. Utah over the last 10 games, by the way, is even Steven in the NBA. Best offense in the NBA over the last just 3 or 4 games. Again, this is a very small sample size because of is Boston, Cleveland, Detroit again, Sacramento under Doug Christie, who we'll see next on Wednesday. That'll be fun. Come on out. Join us for ticket games. Indiana and Denver. Denver's still there again. Teams that can't score: Charlotte, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, San Antonio all of a sudden, Washington, and Chicago. This one, interesting. Top defense in the NBA over the last few games is, and you also have to be careful with anyone who plays Charlotte right now because they're so bad, it's hard to see what it does to stats. But Orlando, who has been one of the best defensive teams in the league, is back there. They're 6 points better than anyone else at 98.9. And the other one that's a little interesting is Oklahoma City is now at 19th through 5 games. So they have been the dominant defense in the NBA, and they may have taken the pedal off the metal since coming back from All-Star break. Detroit, Cleveland, Golden State, Portland, who they played Charlotte, so it's a little questionable. Milwaukee and Boston, teams that aren't defending: Charlotte, Philadelphia, New York, as we mentioned, Phoenix, Indiana, and Atlanta. So the big takeaways to me on Trends Monday: Detroit and the Knicks defense, and that Denver just is legit. And keep an eye on, and I'm not too worried about Oklahoma City taking their pedal off, but it's worth keeping an eye on that they might have. All right, that is Locked On Jazz today. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Maybe we'll dig in a little bit more on the post-scouting of Filipowski and Collier and Cody Williams, and where I think the strengths were undervalued, but the weaknesses still truly do exist. We're not home free on any of them yet. We didn't talk about Cody, but he looks way better on things. A lot of fun there. Thanks very much for tuning in to Locked On Jazz today. Locked On NBA gives you all sorts of fun on YouTube. It's the first ever national 24/7 channel. You can check it out. If you haven't followed me on socials, it's DLock09. Please do follow me on the social channels. And if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, please do it. Locked On Daily. Subscribe to our shows on YouTube. Hit the bell button. We now send you on YouTube that first ever 24/7 national NBA channel. And if you're on audio, go to Locked On NBA next. Get game night every game. See you.